Disney Pro 93 asks, where do I stand on Toy Story 4 and Cars 3? Works for me. Hi everybody and welcome to the Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you guys send me all sorts of questions regarding Disney, whether it's about the company, the parks, the history, the movies, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. Today's going to be a different sort of episode. Usually I go through a good handful of questions, but today I actually only have 3 to go through. And really it's all about one of them, which is probably what the video is titled about. Anyway, let's dive right in and start answering some questions. The first question comes from Megan McClintock, who asks, Soaring is closed currently and will soon feature many landmarks around the world rather than California. What scenes do you hope for? How do you think it'll affect the ride? So if you haven't heard, Soaring's sort of under refurb, and part of it is that they're adding an extra theater, which I think will definitely help alleviate some of the crowding with the attraction. But on top of that, they are also replacing the film with scenes and landmarks around the world as opposed to just Southern California. I think that's a great idea. I actually did a Revisiting Disney episode where I sort of thought of the idea of doing Soaring's in the different pavilions around World Showcase based on that country. This sort of is the more realistic and cheaper way of doing that. And so to that end, I think some of the scenes I would love to see are from the host countries in, World Showcase, Japan, Norway, France, just all of them. Why not do all of them? I think it's a cool way to sort of broaden the appeal of the attraction. I think the fun part is to be flying around and seeing all sorts of sights that you normally wouldn't see from an angle you wouldn't normally see them in. And while there's definitely enough variety in the southwest region, or just the south or the west coast in general, for what Soaring used to be, I think we can get even more variety if we jump around to all these different countries. So I'm really excited. And I don't know if they're doing it for Soaring on the west coast as well. If they are, then that's great. If they aren't, then that just adds some more, unique elements between the two different versions, so you have a reason to ride both. Our next question comes from Effect Reverse, who asks, with the Rivers of Light show opening soon, there have been some questions concerning the 5,000 seat capacity and that it's not enough for the show. Do you think this capacity will be a problem, or do you think Disney has a plan to alleviate these concerns? So I had actually not heard about this, but I do know about, the Rivers of Light show and the Animal Kingdom that's coming out, and I've seen all the construction photos. I mean, it's tough, right? But I think Disney is probably thinking into the future. Now, you have to understand this is going to be a night show. 5,000, that's a lot of seats. But when you think about park capacity, that might not be so much. At least not at first when it's new and popular and everybody wants to go see it. But I think that's the key there. I think, it's important that you build for where you think it's going to level off, not for where it's going to be right when it's new and popular. I wonder how many people, even with the show, are going to make a point of staying to the Animal Kingdom that late. Maybe it's just me. I think it's sort of like a half-day park. And so I'm sure it'll be crowded, and there'll be a lot of desire for people to go see it when it first opens, and this 5,000 seat space might not be enough. But, that sort of serves Disney's ends because it'll seem like it's so super popular that everyone has to see it, which sort of hypes it up more. But I do also think, like, once Avatar Land opens, and once, the hype of it being the newest thing dies down, I think 5,000 might be enough. I mean, I'm not good at the logistics of that sort of stuff, but I think it's important to keep in mind not just the initial reaction when you have a new attraction, but where it levels off to. And I think the same applies for like rides and like how do you design queue areas. It's funny, I've personally never seen the queue line full for Indiana Jones Adventure in Disneyland, but it is such a long queue. And I imagine when it was a new ride, it was probably pretty full most of the time. But, when I rode it, we walked through most of it, and it makes you wonder where that planning went, whether it was planning to alleviate the lines right at the beginning or thinking 10 years down the line when it maybe isn't the most popular attraction. And our final question comes from, nobody asked this question, but it was something that popped up and I really wanted to talk about it. So I guess this question comes from Rob Plays That Game. And Rob Plays That Game asks, Rob, what do you think of Disney After Hours? So if you haven't heard of it yet, Disney announced this new thing called Disney After Hours, and If you're familiar with the parks and how they work, it's very similar to Disney's Extra Magic Hours. It is a $150 ticket that you can purchase to stay in the Magic Kingdom for an additional 3 hours on select nights, and I think it's April and May of this year, 2016. And I guess the idea is because it costs so much and because it's more selective and it's on a ticket basis, that, getting onto each ticket attractions in the Magic Kingdom during those hours will be a lot easier. And so it's sort of like a really high-tiered way to skip the lines, I would imagine. And the other details we've learned are that, it's not meant to cut into extra magic hours. These are going to be taking place on days where where the Magic Kingdom wouldn't have extra magic hours in the night. So it's not cutting away from those. The hours are supposed to be from 11 p.m. to 2 in the morning. So it might be cutting into the park operation by like an hour or so in the summer months. But for the most part, it's not like reducing the time dramatically for people who are just buying normal tickets. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm kind of two minds. There's one mind that is grateful that they seem to be trying to implement this without interrupting the experience for other people who don't want to be involved. Like I said, Extra Magic Hour is not going anywhere. They're not taking away the Magic Kingdom's Extra Magic Hours. They're not cutting into the park hours too much so that you can't go to the park unless you buy this ticket. They seem to be structuring it in a way that if you still go and get your normal ticket, you're going to have the same experience you would have had otherwise. This is just extra stuff for people willing to spend the extra money. On the other hand, I don't like it because I feel like it's a step backwards. When the Disney theme parks were a new idea, you just didn't buy a ticket to the park and go in and ride rides and that was it like you do now. That actually isn't how it worked. The way it worked was you would buy a ticket to get into the park and then you would have to buy a ticket book. And you would have to use these tickets to ride on specific rides, sort of like any other carnival or fairground, right? And that's where the terminology of like an e-ticket attraction comes from. They were rated A through E, and e-tickets were like the big, most flashy and most expensive attractions to ride. And today we still call the most expensive and the most flashy rides e-ticket attractions. But they did away with that. They did away with that in favor of just a pass and the idea that you could get into the park and ride whatever you wanted as much as you wanted. And I think, not being around to use the ticket books, so this is just, from what I'm thinking, I think it was a good idea for Disney to do that. Because I think when you're going on vacation, at least from the perspective of an adult, which is now something I can relate to, the last thing you really want to be thinking about too much is the cost of things. You don't want to be sizing up the value of everything you do on a vacation, because at the end of the day, a vacation is supposed to be relaxing. It's supposed to be something where you could go do whatever you want. Yeah, obviously a Disney vacation is not cheap, but that's something you sort of deal with before and after the vacation. And I think by removing ticket books, they took one step closer to making a Disney vacation this all-inclusive package, right? And it sort of feels that way now, right? When I book a Disney vacation as like a package, I'm getting transportation to and from the parks from the airport and luggage getting moved to and from the parks, and I'm getting the stay at the hotel, and I'm getting the extra magic hours, and I'm getting access to all of the parks, and all of that just sort of comes with the cost. And yes, they all have their additional costs to them if you want to add them on as options. But the idea is you do all that ahead of time. You don't do it after the fact. And I think by creating this system where, you're tacking on $150, which, by the way, I don't think is a good value proposition. $150 for 3 hours. It just, now you have to start breaking down the value of what is a day at the park's worth to you, because a regular day ticket to the Magic Kingdom's like a little over $100, and during those months that could mean well over 12 hours at the park. So now you're paying another $150 for 3 more hours. It just, one, that doesn't make much sense to me. Two, I think it does a negative thing, which is it forces you to really question how much an hour of Disney is worth to you, when you really should just be thinking of it as an overall experience. And 3, and this one might be an unfounded concern. I don't work for Disney. I don't know how the operation works after dark, but I'd wonder if they were to expand this and do this more often, would cutting down on hours where the cast members get to prepare for the next day actually harmed the park. You know, Disney goes through a lot of trouble when the parks close to clean them up. And I'm imagining that work is much tougher during the summer months when the parks are open later and open earlier, and then they've got less time in between to sort of clean everything up and get everything ready. This is just reducing that window even more. Maybe it wouldn't make a big difference, I don't know. But I think just on those earlier merits alone, I'm not fully on board with this idea. I can personally tell you I have no interest in doing something like this. You know, now that I am no longer like a kid going on a Disney vacation with my family, I'm now the adult going and planning and paying for the vacations. Like $150. I love Disney. You know I love Disney because I have a channel and I made hundreds of videos about them. But I just don't think 3 hours at the Magic Kingdom is worth $150. And, you know, I guess the market shows that, or it will show probably, that there are people out there for where it is worth that much money, and they will do that. I also think it might be a little tough for older people to justify $150 for 3 hours when those 3 hours are 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. I can speak from experience. I've stayed on property almost every time because of extra magic hours. However, going during the more popular time of year where those extra magic hours are like from midnight to 1 a.m., I almost never do it because by midnight I'm exhausted. I just want to go to sleep, you know. So I'm wondering who this is for. Who does this target? Because I don't know if older people will be able to stay up till 2 in the morning to get their full $150 worth. I don't think kids who are too young will be able to stay up that late and get their value out of it. So is it really targeting like this, you know, early to mid 20s group who might be able to pull 2 a.m. nights, you know, riding on rides? And is that the same group willing to pay that extra money when they can, on the other hand, just pay $100 for a ticket and go tomorrow for the whole next day? You know what I mean? It just really feels like a way to get around the lines more. But this all kind of goes back to what I originally talked about in a couple of the older episodes where, you know, a lot of this pricing and a lot of these business decisions come from this place where Disney is getting more and more popular, more and more people are going to the parks, and the space isn't expanding. And so you have this supply and demand problem where there's a limited supply but increasing demand. And so how do you even that out? You raise prices. I think Disney should be moving more into a step where everything you do in a Disney vacation is included with the cost, as opposed to breaking things out and making them optional so that you have to really focus on what you value more and what you value less. Because I think once you start doing that, it sort of takes a little of fun out of planning. It sort of forces you to question your vacation decisions, and, you know, it just puts out this image that Disney just wants your money. And, you know, I don't think it's fair to say that that is how Disney operates. Obviously, they do want your money. They are a business. But I think a lot of the way they run the parks shows that they are cognizant and they do care about the guest experience. So I think this takes away from that a little bit. Anyway, that was sort of my rambling rant and discussion about what I thought was a really interesting move for Disney. If you have any questions you want to ask me about Disney, feel free to ask them in the comments below for a future Q&A, or you could let me know on Twitter. I'm @RobPlays. I want to thank you all for watching. Let me know, what do you think about this? Would you pay $150 to go to Magic Kingdom for 3 hours? Maybe you would. Maybe I'm in the minority here and I just don't realize it. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.